Just again, if everyone can mute their lines and turn off their videos, it will help us with the presentation and let everything run smoothly. So my name is Peter Erasmus. I'm a short-term broker at Lifestyle Brokers #1, and we are out here in the West Rand in Ruimsig in Gauteng. So we've seen a massive spike in cyber attacks since the global pandemic has forced companies to let their staff work from home. So, and as a result, we thought it would be imperative to create awareness around the topic. So during the course of today's webinar, we'll be looking at what cybercrime is, the cyber stats in South Africa, who has been hacked, what a cyber policy covers, how does the POPI Act fit into everything, and how do you protect yourself. Cannot think of a more suitable person to talk us through today's topic than Candice Sutherland. Candice is a cyber insurance underwriter at I2 Special Risks. It's a special underwriting management agency underwritten on the Hollard Insurance license. So Candice is a qualified certified associate specializing in finance. She holds a certificate in cybersecurity through the University of Johannesburg, and she's currently studying at ISACA. Specifically on the topic of cybercrime and cyber insurance, Candice has appeared on Cliff Central, ETV, ENCA, and CNBC, as well as featured printed articles in numerous newspapers and magazines, including the FA News and Risk SA. We're very grateful to Candice for setting time aside to educate us and look forward to an exciting session. If there's any questions that you will have during the session, please put them in the chat box. We will attend to those at the end of the presentation. Again, just a reminder to switch off your cameras and mute your lines. So without further ado, I'm sure you didn't come here to listen to me talk. So over to you, Candice. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate that really kind introduction. I'm just going to share my slides. So will you just give me a shot that you can see my slides nice and clear?
Slides are clear, thank you.
Perfect. So thank you so much for your time, everybody. As Peter said, we're going to be discussing cybercrime and cyber insurance. So first and foremost, it's very important to define what cybercrime is, because when I'm presenting to audiences, people will say cybercrime is stealing money from your bank account, but it's so much broader than that. So any criminal activity which is done on a computer or involves the internet is defined as cybercrime. In South Africa, we have the highest global probability of a repeat data breach at 43% versus a global average of 27.9%. The average number of records breached last year was 21,000 per breach versus a global average of 24,615. The average cost per lost or stolen record amounted to 1,775 Rand. Average total cost of a South African data breach, 32 million. And cyber crime is voted the most disruptive economic crime over the next 2 years. And it far exceeds bribery and corruption, which was listed at 14%, and cyber was listed at 26%. So if we look at some statistics, this is from the Norton Semantic Report, and it says that there are at least 1 million victims of cybercrime every day, which is there are twice as many cybercrime victims as newborn babies, and a new victim every 14 seconds. According to this Norton Semantic Report, your PA is your most hacked person in any organization. So she is by no means the target of the hack, but she is the person who will be hacked in order to get into the company. Media is also really highly rated versus something like R&D, which is research and development. So if we look at government institutions, there's very much a cyclical sort of trend that we see with hacks on government institutions. So if it is tender season, then there's quite a big spike. So let me give you an example. Let's pretend that Peter and I are tendering for an Eskom project as an example. I have not had a good success rate where Peter is quite skilled in the art of tendering. So what I would do, if I don't have the technical abilities to hack Peter myself, I'm going to hire a hacker online on the internet, hacker for hire. I will get them to hack into Peter's system, copy paste his tender submission, and then I'll put my name at the bottom, undercut the commission by a couple of percentage points or R1,000,000 or whatever, and then hopefully I'll win that tender. And we see a massive, massive spike on hacking of government institutions when it is tender season. According to this Norton Semantic report again, South Africa is the 3rd worst country in the world for cybercrime attacks. So Mexico was ranked as 1st worst, Brazil and China ranked as 2nd, and South Africa ranked as 3rd worst. And we far supersede the global average. The percent of South African adults who were a victim of cybercrime was 84%, which is really a crazy, crazy, crazy number. But how would you know if you have been hacked? So the problem with being a victim of cybercrime is that it's always a reactive situation. Only once you become a victim will you know that something has actually gone wrong. There's no forewarning. So this is a great repository. It's called Have I Been Pwned? I'd like us to all quickly do this exercise. So just grab your cell phone, go to the internet, type in haveibeenpwned.com, and all this is a central repository of data breaches that have occurred globally, and you can search your email address to see if you have been breached. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second so that we can all do this together. Okay, so I'm going to Have I Been Pwned? Let me turn off my background. Okay, so this is what the website looks like. In this white address bar, I'm going to type in my personal email address. So this would be your Gmail, your Yahoo, your Hotmail account, not your work-owned email. And I encourage you to do this, and we can all do it together and then have a quick little chat about the findings. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. Let me assure you, it is just a central repository of breaches that have occurred around the world where you could search your details to see if you are a victim. Okay, so I've put in my details and then I push the little dark blue button saying pwned, and that will either bring up a red screen or a green screen. As you can see on my phone, it's bringing up a red screen, which means that my details have been exposed in a data breach. If I scroll through this list, it will tell me what breaches my details have been exposed in. So I have, as of today, 14 breaches that my details have been exposed in. It will tell you what the breach is, as well as what information of yours was compromised. So I scroll through the list, and it tells me all of these breaches, as well as what info was compromised. So let's read two as an example. I'll go to a well-known one, Dropbox. So Dropbox in mid-2012 suffered a data breach which exposed the stored credentials of tens of millions of customers. The compromised data is my email address and my password. So invariably your email address is your username and your password is the exact same password for every single account because you can remember passwords. The problem is, for the last 8 years, every single account I've signed up for using that, my email address is my username and my password is my password, that has been freely available on the internet because Dropbox was hacked 8 years ago and still has not had the courtesy to tell me that I was a victim of that cyber breach. If I look at my next one, it's Exactus. In June 2018, Exactus publicly leaked 340 million records. The compromised data, credit status information, date of birth, education level, email address, ethnicity, family structure, financial investments, gender, home ownership status, income level, IP address, marital status, name, net worth, occupation, personal interest, phone number, physical address, religion, and spoken language. So in the Dropbox data breach, in order to secure my account, I can, one, create an entire new email, so I'm going from Yahoo to Hotmail, or I can just change the password on that account, which will secure it. But how do I change all of these details? The answer is you don't, and this is the problem with cybercrime. It's always a reactive situation, a reactive incident, but in an attempt for me to try and be proactive, I can now start monitoring my mail, monitoring emails, If post gets delivered to my house saying I qualified for a 10,000 Rand RCS loan with a card in it, what I'll do is I'll call that company, I'll call Woolworths and say, I did not apply for a new account. And they can say, well, you were in our Tygerberg office 2 weeks ago and somebody did open an account on your name. So that is enabling me to be proactive and proactively deal with being a victim of cybercrime, a victim of identity theft, and dealing with that situation. So I'll quickly just hand over to the room. Is there anybody that wants to ask a question specifically on have I been pwned? Or do you want to share a story or have a question on one of the breaches that your details might have been exposed in? I'll just leave it open for a second. If you do have a green screen, please try your husband's details, your wife's details, your child, your side check. Try somebody else's email account and see if that brings up red. If you try your work-owned email and that brings up a red screen, please notify your IT team as quickly as possible because nobody hacks a company and goes after one person. It is much easier to steal 1 Rand from 10,000 people than 10,000 Rand from one person. So if you are trying your work email and it's red, please notify your IT team. Does anybody want to ask a question on this over here?
Wessel Botha, yeah.
Hi, Wessel.
That's it. I wanted to find out, I've heard rumors, and again, it's rumors, that if you put your information into that have I been pwned, that information can be sold off again, utilized for marketing purposes. Is that true or not? Do you know?
Sure. It's not true. So the point of the site is it's a central repository to show you if you have been exposed in a breach. Nobody would actually voluntarily put the information in knowing that it could be sold to somebody else. Also, we're going to chat about POPI, but under POPI and the Consumer Protection Act, you're not able to just sell databases anymore. It's illegal to do that. So I don't for a second believe that that is true. I do use this example constantly in all of my presentations. I also subscribe to this. And I wouldn't do that if I didn't think it was a secure platform.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Candice. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation. If you would like to ask questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat box, or we will have some time at the end. So I'm going to go back here. Peter, if you can just let me know if we are on the right page.
Liberty Shares.
Perfect. So this is a page to show you South African companies that have been hacked and what has been posted in the newspaper about them. So Liberty, while we're not entirely sure what actually happened, what a lot of people don't know is that their share price fell by 5%, which was more than R1 billion in the week of that hack happening. What it cost them to send those 4 SMSs to the entire database was 6 million Rand. And we've heard that they've said that there will be no bonuses and increases for any staff member of Liberty because of the incident that occurred. So although you as a staff member of whatever company, even if you are not the naughty one, you are the one that can be directly impacted when your company gets hacked because now they have to cover that financial loss, which means you don't get a bonus and you don't get an increase for the next couple of years. But these are just some articles to show you that there is no escaping the reputational damage associated with a cyber breach. And it can be catastrophic, especially if you're an SME. So 60 million records, that was the deeds office, posted online. Hackers nail unsecure websites on AfriHost server. So they didn't actually hack the company, but they hacked the ISP, being AfriHost, which then still exposed the company. So how do you truly secure yourself against this new wave of crime where it's just easier to do it on a computer? And the answer is you don't. How much tech, how many people you employ to monitor your systems. If somebody wants to hack you, they will. Hitzner hit by another security incident. Standard Bank, Master Deed, Zuma, Old Mutual. What's interesting about Old Mutual is that they said that no losses were incurred. And to me, as a cyber underwriter, I struggle with that because how were no losses, how did you quantify that no losses were incurred if you didn't do any sort of investigation? So in order to do an investigation, because Old Mutual is not a computer forensic company means they would have had to pay somebody to do that investigation. So how is it that no losses were incurred? Did they not investigate? It's a little bit difficult, and what you definitely don't want to do is leave your customers thinking that you don't care about them and you haven't done anything even though you have been hacked, or that you didn't go to the expense of ensuring that their data was now secure, considering that you were the ones that exposed it. Study shows that 66% of small and medium businesses will shut down if hit by a data breach. A data breach is your fault. That's what the CEOs say. Hacked companies underperform by 42% after 3 years, and security breaches have had people fired. So somebody has to take the blame, and hopefully it's not you. So let's chat about some South African companies that have been hacked. These are all available in the public domain. So I might be sharing information you haven't heard of, but this is not sensitive or private information that I'm going to tell you about. So Postbank, a gentleman by the name of Israel Basung was specifically placed into Postbank with the sole intention of stealing money from them. A cybercrime syndicate managed to get him employed. What his job was to do was he created 103 ghost client accounts. He deposited 42 million rand amongst those 103 accounts. He changed the ATM withdrawal limit from 1,000 to 500,000 rand. And then over a period of 3 days, that syndicate that he was placed in Postbank by visited 5,437 ATMs in 3 days. They managed to withdraw 30 million of the 42 million rand deposited. Now get this, a whole year later, the exact same cybercrime syndicate places the exact same person into Gautrain. There, his job was to steal funds. So what he did is he walked around to any person in a managerial or supervisory capacity with a memory stick and said, I'm from IT, I need to do an update on your computer. Go have a cup of coffee, go have a smoke, go relax while I do this. It shouldn't take longer than 15 minutes. He managed to plug that memory stick, which was loaded with malware's malicious software, onto 38 managers' computers within Gautrain. What it cost Gautrain is 11 million rand. So he didn't actually get to steal any money. He was caught and fired and marched out the building before he could steal any money. But what it still cost that company is 11 million rand. So to upgrade the IT system, they spent 8.5 million rand, 1.2 million rand on removing the malware, 30,000 rand on changing hard drives on the laptops and computers, and about 400,000 rand in business interruption losses. Do you see why it's difficult for me to understand that Old Mutual was hacked and had no losses at all? Let's chat about a few more interesting ones. View finds the records of 934,000 people exposed online. Goliath and Goliath Comedy Club, 700 emails were sent from the MD's account saying, please note we are a family-owned business. We need you to settle your outstanding invoice. By the way, we've changed our bank from Bank A to Bank B. A total of 300,000 rand was paid in outstanding invoices, and obviously that money taken out of the bank account cleared, gone. I'm not sure who on this call can withdraw 300,000 rand from an ATM, but I know that I can't. So it just shows me again that there has to be collusion with somebody in the bank in order for them to open that account and withdraw those funds. The problem is Goliath and Goliath Comedy Club had to shut down their brand new establishment in Melrose Arch very shortly after this incident had happened because 300,000 rand was stolen from them and they're a family-owned business. The Constitutional Court of South Africa, 15 computers were stolen. They had judges and officials' sensitive information on those laptops. Hetzner, customer details, names, addresses, ID numbers, phone numbers, domain names, FTP passwords, and bank account details were tagged. BizNews, there were more than 100,000 queries in an attempted DDoS. So a DDoS is a distributed denial of service attack. How it works, let's pretend that it is the Durban July and we're not in COVID. You own a hotel, I own a hotel. We are the two closest hotels to the racetrack of Durban July. So what I will do, I will hire somebody on the internet to send a DDoS to your booking system. so that you can't accept any bookings, meaning that I'm the next closest hotel and I'll get full before you do. And then hopefully I'll steal all the customers from you because I'm doing it at a premium rate. And my 100 rooms will be full before your hotel will be able to take a single booking. So you can hire people very easily on the internet to send these sort of attacks to other companies. KFC, a specific strain of malware's malicious software called Dexter, infected their point of sale devices. So only 1 in every 3 transactions actually went through. The rest didn't go through at all. They had said this was pre-Gautrain, that they were the biggest breach in South African history, but they wouldn't disclose what their losses were. So reputational damage. Standard Bank, 300 million rand stolen. Why? Because their ATMs were using outdated software, and 15 arrests have been made. All 15 people with links to the Japanese mafia. Not a single person in South Africa, not a single South African. But the reality is that money is gone. Gone. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on and not discuss every single hack, but I'd be happy to answer questions at the end. So let's chat about some legislation. So POPI is the Protection of Personal Information Act. What excites me about this act is that it tells me, as a consumer, Candice, that I have a constitutional right that my privacy will be protected. And that's a very good thing, meaning that you can't just willy-nilly sell these databases. If somebody does call you and say, oh, it's Candice from Vodacom, I want to sell you another flippin' cell phone contract, then you can say to that person, under the Consumer Protection Act and POPI, where did you get my information from? Because I did not consent that you can call me. So you are allowed to do that. And new pieces of POPI were enacted on the 1st of July 2020. So Pansi Tlakula was appointed as the information regulator in 2018, and we've been waiting for their inception date. That has now come into effect 1 July 2020, and it says that all companies in South Africa have to be POPI compliant by 1 July 2021. Whether you are or are not compliant, if you expose your client or your employee's information, like in a breach, that there will be a 10 million rand fine, or you can face up to 10 years in prison. In terms of Section 99(1), which came into effect 1 July, the employer may be held liable for the conduct of the employees. So typical situation, and let's pretend again we are pre-COVID and we're actually all driving around to meetings. If you have a staff member who's seeing a client and they are hijacked, or they stop at a petrol station, their car gets stolen, or their car gets broken into at their house and their laptop gets stolen from the vehicle, the information that is on that laptop is of a nature which is sensitive. It's private, confidential information belonging to you, the company. It's intellectual property. And under POPI, it's saying that as the custodian of that data, the custodian of the laptop being you could face a 10 million rand fine. If you don't have 10 million rand, you can go to jail for 10 years. But your employer can also face a fine because the employee's laptop was stolen. So is that fair? Probably not. But, how do you draw this line between what is fair and what isn't fair? So this is strict liability. It means that no negligence is required in order for you to face that fine. And for that reason, and that reason alone, you are able to purchase insurance to cover the POPI fine. It is the only fine that is insurable. The ECTA is the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act. This is an act that is in place, and it says any person who intentionally and without authority or without permission to do so accesses data, intercepts data, corrupts data. I'll quickly tell you a story about an Eskom employee. She was dating somebody at work. They broke up. She started dating another colleague. She got her new boyfriend, to call into the Eskom head office to pretend to be the old boyfriend to reset his password. Once they did that, she then started sending really rude emails from his email account. Under the ECTA, she did not have permission to access that data, so she was charged and fined 40,000 rand under the ECTA. the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act. So any person who intentionally, without authority or permission to do so, accesses, intercepts, corrupts, deletes, destroys data, if you can convict that person, they can face a fine or a period in prison not exceeding 5 years. The Cybercrimes Bill will replace the ECTA, and that has not been passed as yet. This will impose a 15 million rand fine or a 15-year prison sentence on the perpetrator if you can catch them, and sometimes that's a very, very big if. So I want to talk about cyber insurance, and this is a policy that you as a company can purchase to protect your company against things like a cyber breach. So the trigger of the policy is a privacy breach or a network breach. Either one has to occur for the policy to respond. It doesn't have to be both. Sometimes one can lead to the other, but it doesn't have to be both in order for the policy to respond. So a privacy breach is a breach of confidentiality or right to privacy of any employee or any third party. So you are the client, your company purchased cyber insurance. You would be covered by that cyber policy as the employee, and Candice, me, I would be covered as a client, customer, patient of your establishment. The network security breach, there's lots of words on the screen. All I want you to know is that if you are hacked, regardless of how it happens, the policy will respond. So there either needs to be a privacy breach affecting the employee or the client, or you must be hacked in order for the policy to respond. And how the policy responds is as follows. The cyber liability is the defense and settlement of your customer suing you because there was a privacy breach or a network breach. So you are hacked and your customer sues you. This is the module that will help you with the defense and settlement of those claims. The fines and penalties, as mentioned, this would cover the POPI fine. It's the fines and penalties to the extent insurable by law, such as regulatory fines, penalties, or punitive damages imposed by a regulatory body, as long as they are insurable by law. Your crisis management and notifications expenses. This is the part of the cyber policy that will pay for the cost to notify every customer. If you think back to the beginning of the presentation, I said what it's going to cost you per person affected by a breach, according to the IBM Ponemon data breach study, is 1,775 Rand. So to quantify what an appropriate amount of cyber insurance that you should purchase, take the amount of employees, add the amount of clients, customers, suppliers, look at what your data destruction policy is. If you're a financial services provider, that would be 5 years as an example. So quantify the amount of records that you've stored for the last 5 years, times that by 1,775, and that should be a starting limit for you to look at. Another rule of thumb you can look at is half revenue and double. So if you are a 5 million Rand revenue company, you should look at half, 2.5 million, revenue, 5 million, double, 10 million Rand cyber limit. So your crisis management and notification expenses, it will cover things like a PR campaign. Why? Because a proper professional public relations company is the only one that is going to be able to help you deal with the reputational damage associated with a cyber breach. It would cover the remediation services and then nice extras like credit and identity theft monitoring for every person affected by that breach. Your data recovery and business interruption module, this covers the cost for specialists to investigate, contain, manage, and recover from the incident. It covers your network or your business interruption. So if you look at a traditional liability policy, in order for business interruption to trigger, it means that there must be physical damage. So there has been a fire, there has been a flood, your server room got wet, and therefore there's been physical damage to your network, versus me as Candice with my hacker hat on. If I hack into your environment, there's no physical damage. So a traditional liability policy will not cover a cyber breach because a cyber policy has a non-physical damage business interruption element. This policy will also cover the cost to restore and recover your data and operations. It extends to cover things like staff overtime, increased cost of working, as well as the loss of business income, which is the income you would have earned had the breach not happened. In the example I gave earlier, you own a hotel, I own a hotel right by the race course. It is Durban July weekend. I send a DDoS to your network, meaning that you can't accept any bookings. You have a cyber policy, the investigation is done, the policy will pay for that investigation and will cover the loss of business income. It's the income you would have earned on Durban July weekend, which is different to any other weekend, had the breach not happened. Your cyber extortion, this is an optional module. This would cover costs to investigate and mitigate a cyber extortion threat. So this is where somebody hacks into your system and they hold you to ransom, and they then have a ransom demand. Invariably, that is in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin theoretically is supposed to be untraceable. It's not, but just for the sake of argument, we'll say that it is. At today's price, one Bitcoin will cost you 165,900 Rand. So you will be held to 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bitcoin. The policy will deploy specialists to investigate, is this actually a genuine extortion threat? Do they have your data? Yes, they do. Okay, then they will negotiate and settle that ransom from your cyber policy. The digital media liability, this would follow acts such as defamation, unintentional infringement or invasion of privacy, public disclosure of private facts, and this is for something on social media. So it includes the publication of any digital media content, text, graphics, audio, and video content. So anything that you as a company put onto social media that then somebody sues you for something like defamation or unintentional infringement. Depending on the business that you do, there are some optional extensions that you can purchase. So number one, initial response phase. That is a module that will waive your deductible. Your deductible is your excess. Exactly like you have car insurance, you are liable for the first 5,000 Rand. It's the same on cyber insurance. Depending what your company does, let's say you are purchasing a 50 million Rand cyber insurance policy, your deductible is 250,000 Rand, then you could purchase initial response phase, which will waive that deductible for the first 72 hours. Your e-financial loss module, it is not the intention of a cyber policy to cover theft of funds. Theft of funds is a consequential loss of a network breach, but you can extend the policy to cover that. So the e-financial loss is funds for which the insured is legally responsible as a direct result of a system security incident. OSP is your outsourced service provider. You can extend your policy to cover an outsourced service provider for the provision of the services that they provide to you. Sorry. Physical damage. If a hack on your system causes physical damage, you can have an optional extension to cover that. Phone phreaking, if somebody hacks into your PABX or your VoIP system and you generally have a phone bill of 4,000 to 4,500 Rand, and this month it's 35,000, chances are somebody's hacked into your phone system. Phone phreaking would cover that sort of loss. PCI DSS is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. If you are a company that accepts payment via debit or credit card, you must be PCI DSS accredited under Visa and merchant regulations. And this is a module that will help you cover the fines and the penalties specifically by the PCI exposure. So what a lot of customers, clients, and brokers have said, well, I have a GL policy, can't you just add on cyber? And the reality is, to cover a first-party, third-party exposure of a network breach and a privacy breach, you can't change the trigger of a GL policy to cover the full cyber exposure. So some underwriters will give you a cyber extension, but it is not full cyber insurance. So if we look at a professional indemnity policy, that provides limited cover for third-party data loss, but only in the provision of professional services. So only if you are an IT company will your PI policy have a small element of third-party data loss cover. If you are an attorney, there is no cover for third-party data loss because you are an attorney and you're not in IT. A general liability policy that because data is intangible, there is no cover, there is no overlap between a GL and a cyber policy. Your business interruption policy, typical BI policy, requires physical damage. I'm a hacker, I've hacked into your system, there's no physical damage, therefore there is no overlap in cover. Your computer all risks, that would cover cost to repair damaged hardware or lost data, but because of a physical peril only, such as theft, fire, flood. Your fidelity guarantee or commercial crime policy, that is a policy that provides cover for a dishonest or fraudulent act by an employee, and it's first-party financial loss only. So there's no third-party cover, there's no extortion, there's no liability, there's no business interruption, so there's no overlap. And your directors and officers policy will be triggered after a cyber breach. So I think I did mention it earlier. Somebody in the company has to take the fall for the cyber breach that we have experienced. We have an external IT service provider because we're a small company, so we don't have an in-house IT team. So whoever the manager is that oversees that relationship, that's the one who is going to be fired, because now we've had a hack because Johnny was using password 123 as his password instead of practicing a safe password policy. So your directors and officers policy will be triggered after a cyber breach. And now the most important question, how much does it cost? How much? So we have two offerings at i2. We've got a full corporate offering, and then this is a pre-underwritten i2 Go. If I can explain this, if you are an SME, so your revenue is under 250 million Rand per annum, and you are not one of the companies listed at the bottom, so you are not a financial institution, you are not a call center, not a telemarketer, etc., then these are the premiums you would qualify for. If your revenue is between 0 and 10 million Rand, you fall into the purple category. Your deductible, which is your excess, is 15,000 Rand. Your annual premium for R1 million cyber insurance, 5,375, 2.5, 5, 10, 15, and 25 million Rand. You can see those premiums on the screen. If your revenue was 105 million, you would fall into the orange category. And you can see the deductible goes up to 100,000. The premiums also go up. These premiums can be paid for monthly, so you divide the premium by 12. There's nothing added on, no additional expenses. And Peter would be able to help you with that in applying for cyber, but this is just a cost indication to show you that for under 500 Rand a month, depending on the business that you are and your revenue, you could get R1 million cyber insurance. So cyber is not expensive, and it's not a question of if you should or if you would like to have cyber, you really should. As part of good corporate governance, it is a really important idea for you to have a cyber insurance policy to truly deal with the cost of a cyber breach. You are not cyber experts. You are not in forensics. You are not au fait with dealing with dark web sort of matters. So you really shouldn't try and remediate the situation yourself. But as with all insurance, you can't crash your car and then buy a policy. So it's important to get retroactive date now, because trying to purchase a policy after an event does make it a little bit more complicated and tricky, and all prior events will be excluded. So that will have to be noted on the policy. I'm not saying you can't get cyber. If you have had an incident, you definitely can. You should not be penalized for having a prior incident. So depending on who you are speaking to, there should be no sort of penalty, but there would be some questions around, if A happened, what have you done to prevent A happening ever again? So that is about it from me. I want to thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Peter is the guy that you need to speak to about getting a cyber quote. Any questions, I'm sure we'll open up the floor, but I'd like to thank you so much for this time. Thank you very much to Peter and Lifestyle for giving me the opportunity to present, and I'll hand back over to you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Candice. Thank you. This is a very nice session.
Great.
Can you just mute your line there? I've got an echo.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you very much. It was very informative. I'm sure that everyone has learned something new, and we can take something away from today's presentation. So I want to open the floor now for any other questions. Just one that came through is from Anthony. He just wanted to ask again about how to calculate the actual cost of the insurance that you need. So I think it was the 1775 multiplied by everyone. If you can just run through that again.
Perfect. So there's two rules of thumb. One is half revenue, double revenue. So if your revenue is 10 million Rand, you should get 5, 10, and 20 million Rand quotes, and then decide on affordability between those. The second, more scientific approach is to use the Ponemon data breach study, which says take the number of employees, add the number of clients, dependent on your data destruction policy. So if it is 5 years, take the amount of employees and client records that you've stored for 5 years, times that by 1775, and that will give you a figure. So what I'll do, Peter, I'll send you an email with this in which you can distribute with the recording. I don't expect anyone to be able to remember this or write it down now, but I will send that through to you in writing and you can mail it through to everybody.
That's perfect. Then something else I want to find out also. So I have a small little business with all the social medias that you can think of, the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and someone then hacks my social media account and then holds me ransom for it to say, you know what, in order for me to give your account back, you need to give me, 100,000, 500,000, $1 million, whatever the case may be. And you got like 20,000 followers. So, I mean, it took you quite a while to build that up. So how would the policy respond with that?
Excellent question. So where this becomes a little bit tricky is it your personal Peter's Instagram, or is it your work-owned? Because your work-owned Instagram account, as an example, that could be covered by your cyber policy under the digital media element, because that covers things like defamation, copyright infringement, anything that happens on social media. If you are held to ransom, that's your cyber extortion module. So if you are held to ransom for 25 million Rand and you have a 1 million Rand cyber policy, you don't have enough cover. But we would, as part of the incident response panel, we would negotiate that ransom as low as possible. And again, I'll reiterate, it's much easier to steal 1 Rand from 10,000 people than 10,000 Rand from one person. So if the ransom demand is 500,000 Rand and you say, I only have 5,000, they will take that 5,000 and run. The important thing is, how did they get into the system? Are they still on? How do I get them off? And that's part of the cyber policy will respond to that. Second caveat, if it is your personal, so Candice's Facebook that is hacked and somebody's saying, I've got your naughty pictures or naughty messages, then your company-owned cyber policy is not going to respond to that, because that's my personal capacity. So there is a policy that you can purchase for you yourself, as Peter Erasmus, for me, as Candice Sutherland in my personal capacity, but that's not going to be covered by a business cyber policy.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you very much. We've got another question that came through. So in your last slide, we have indicated the types of companies that will not be covered. Are they excluded because you don't insure those types of companies at all? Or would you consider offering cyber insurance after evaluation, but costs may be higher due to the greater risk of those company types?
Exactly 100% right. So we do write those companies, but they would be underwritten. So the intention of the I2Go is there's 5 very quick questions, yes or no answer, and then you would qualify for those rates. Anyone who falls outside of the scope, if you have operations outside South Africa, you've had a prior incident, your revenue exceeds 250 million Rand, or you are a financial institution, as an example, we as the underwriters would want to have a much deeper look into your IT infrastructure and your network, and that will be underwritten on a case-by-case basis. So we will definitely look at that. We're not excluding them. They just don't qualify for this offering. If I can touch super quick just on companies that we wouldn't write. So we don't write government institutions. We don't write anybody that has anything to do with adult media, so pornography, any online gaming or gambling, any universities, because universities, it's the students who hack to try and change their marks or steal the papers. So universities are just a mess. Government institutions, and that's literally it. So everybody else we would definitely consider, and depending on the amount of information that you give us, would enable us to truly understand what you have done. You know, if you're ISO 27001 accredited, then you should be rewarded for going through that accreditation. Or you're PCI DSS accredited, you should definitely be rewarded for being proactive. But as underwriters, we wouldn't know that. And that's why there's a full 8-page proposal form. It's not difficult. The IT person must complete it. It takes 30 minutes. If it's somebody that knows what they're doing, if it's a receptionist, it's going to be a mess. So it doesn't have to be a difficult, complicated process by any means. But if you need help, Peter is here to help you. I am here to help you. No problem.
Great, thank you. Then we've got a question from Krista. She says she's got a debt review company. Should she get a cyber policy? So from my side, definitely, considering that you will be dealing with clients' personal information. So yes, I would definitely recommend that happening. I don't know if Candice has anything else to add.
Yes, please. So I've dealt with quite a few brokers that say, well, you know, I predominantly have attorneys on my books and they don't have a cyber exposure. And I can literally just puke. So if you have an employee, a client, or a computer, you have a cyber exposure. So I challenge anyone to tell me about a company that doesn't have a client, an employee, or a computer. Show me a company, because that's the company that doesn't need cyber. Everyone else does. And bearing in mind, you know, why rob a bank? Because that's where the money is. But is it easier for me to rob the debt review company that this major bank is using? Yes, because they are not spending millions on tech and firewalls and anti-malware and sandboxing and have 25 employees looking after their IT security. It's one small little SME, which is far easier for me to intercept than it is for me to get into Standard Bank. But the exposure, once I'm in the system, is exactly the same because they have a direct plugin. So it's your SME that truly this sort of event can cripple an entire family instead of like Standard Bank where 300 million rand is stolen and they just carry on, you know. So it really is your SME where these can have catastrophic consequences if something does go wrong and they are hacked.
There we go. So if there's any other questions, we can have them now. Anyone else at this stage? Okay, doesn't look like there's anything coming through. So I'm posting my details in the chat box as well. So if there's anything more specific that you need, please get in touch with me. So in closing, basically what I took away from today is that we need to ensure we follow the best security practices and that our company's IT policies are aligned with securing data. You always should have your client's confidentiality of personal information first and foremost in mind above anything else to avoid having to defend your reputation as a company. So anything else from your side, Candice? Oh, we got a hand up. In terms of POPI, will your policy adapt under the new updated legislation?
Excellent question. Yes, it will. We haven't specifically limited the policy to POPI for that exact reason, that we've waited since 2014 for it to come into play. So the policy wording doesn't say the Protection of Personal Information Act as passed in 2016 or 2018. It just says regulatory legislation. So yes, it absolutely will cover this new 1 July 2020 update, as well as the 1 July 2021 expiration of the POPI compliance period. So yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions at this stage? Are there any malware or antiviruses that you recommend?
Very good question. Thank you. It's difficult for me to recommend because there's so many options, and it would definitely have to go with more of a business case scenario. So how many people you have, how many endpoints, how many external devices. All I can say is if you are going to have employees And especially now working from home, it's something that hasn't been avoidable, but let's pretend that COVID wasn't happening. If you are going to give your staff member access to their mailbox on their cell phone, please, please, please put antivirus on that cell phone as a minimum request. If the staff member doesn't want it on, then they don't get their work emails to their device, because it's the only way that you as a company can start trying to mitigate. Because cyber is not an IT issue, right? People say it's an IT problem. IT must sort this out. Cyber is a people problem, because it is your staff members that will bypass the rules at every opportunity they get. I'm not allowed on Facebook, you watch me. I'm not allowed to download movies, but I've got the whole of Game of Thrones on my laptop. So cyber is a people problem, and people are your weakest link. So to try and secure the people, get antivirus, get anti-malware. I can't say that this one is better than the rest, because I can't expose my professional indemnity in that way. But whatever antivirus you get, make sure that it extends to cover the mobile devices, BYOD, bring your own device. And then teach your staff members, or know, you as the company, know how to remote wipe that device. So if something goes wrong, and I'm at Monte Casino Bird Park on a Saturday and my cell phone gets stolen, I can call my company and say my cell phone's gone missing. They will immediately remote wipe that device. So they're trying to mitigate their exposure as much as they can by still allowing me to have my cell phone, which I can go on Tinder and I can go on Facebook and I can do what I want, but trying to protect the company's exposures as well.
Great. There's another question that came through. Is there an online calculator to help calculate your risk?
Okay. Very good question. No, there isn't, because any company that wouldn't qualify for the I2Go, there's a very long scientific algorithm that we use, and every single question on the proposal form will either increase premium, decrease premium, or disqualify you from cover. So as a very basic example, we say that you should have a minimum password policy of 8 characters. If you say you have 8 characters, it will apply a normal base rate of 1. If you have under 8 characters, it means you don't qualify for cover, so then you wouldn't get that. Whereas if you had a password policy of 14 characters, then it would apply a base rate of 0.85, so it would decrease and reward you for being proactive. So this is very sensitive intellectual property that we've worked on, and we've refined and refined and refined over the last 7 years. So it's not something we would just put out on the internet, and because it's our sole underwriting tool. But the proposal form will, every single question, and that's why every question has to be answered, will either increase, decrease, or disqualify you from having cyber cover.
Thank you, Candice. That was a very intricate answer, but yeah, thank you very much for that. Do we have any other questions from anyone at this stage?
If I may just say one more thing, just in closing, if you have absolutely no idea what your exposure is, or what sort of limits you should purchase, then you're absolutely welcome to say that. Once you submit the application through to your insurance broker, being Peter, you can say, I'm kind of comfortable carrying this sort of deductible, this sort of excess, so I think that 50,000, I could do that. Then as the underwriters, we would give you a range of options, and then it's really just based on affordability. So if 2.5 million Rand with 100,000 deductible is more attractive than a 1 million with a 15,000 Rand deductible, then at least you have that option, and you are more than welcome to go back and forward and say, okay, this is a bit high, can we rather do that? And you can ask for multiple options, multiple deductibles, and we will give you whatever you need till it comes to a price point that you're comfortable, but you have to guide us in terms of that.
Cool. Another question came through. Do you make provision for business abroad in Australia as well?
Very good question, and no, we don't. So our policy is written around sub-Saharan Africa and Indian Ocean islands. So the furthest we could extend is Mauritius, and the reason we do that is because our incident response team is here in South Africa. So if we look at our competitors, you would have to call a line in the UK, and then you'd have to wait for them to respond from there. Where we have people all throughout Sub-Saharan Africa and Indian Ocean Islands. In order for us to send an incident response panel to Australia, the time is not conducive and the cost just doesn't make sense. So our policies are Sub-Saharan Africa, Indian Ocean Islands. We would have to then exclude that Australian subdivision, territory, whatever, and write the South African policy. It's not that we absolutely can't help. We could get reinsurance to cover it, but that would be the anomaly, not the norm, because we want to pride ourselves in the fact that if you are in Botswana and there's an incident, that we can get to you today and we can sort that situation out today, not apply for visas and flights and hotels and make a mess.
100%. If a company has all the required cyber policies, processes, procedures, and training, no doubt relevant reduction in premium will apply? Question mark.
Absolutely, yes. The more proactive you are, the better it would be for you in terms of premium. But the only way I'm going to know that is if you tell me. So you look at the proposal form, it doesn't give you a specific space to add the super amazing, fantastic thing that you do. So then you send it on email or you type it on a letterhead. So we are not going to go and investigate your IT infrastructure. We are not going to go to your office and look at your firewalls. You have to tell me, and if whatever you say, that you're doing pen testing and you had 47 vulnerabilities and you've now corrected them, then yes, you should be rewarded for that. Absolutely. So our I2Go, those are pre-underwritten rates. Those rates are not going to, you will not get a discount based on that, but this would be for a more full corporate sort of offering.
Perfect. All right. Any other thing, ladies and gentlemen? I think that's about it. Candice, I want to thank you so much for your time. It was really an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you to everyone that joined us for this webinar and taking time out of your day. We really, really appreciate it. And we hope that we've answered some questions and given you a bit of food for thought. So thank you, Candice.
Thank you so much. And thanks to you, Peter. It was great to present to you all. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. We'll see you again. Bye.
Bye-bye.